Hello, math teachers. This is Gary Parker again. So I'm going to log us into XYZ and show you how to create assessments in XYZ. So I have a whole bunch of courses to pick from. I'm going to choose Math 70 just for the heck of it, but it works the same regardless of the course. So let's suppose you want to make a new assessment. Easiest way to do that is at the top here you have an Add Here bar, or you can add an assessment. Assessment is anything that you use to get feedback from students on their understanding. That could be a test, it could be a quiz, or it could be homework. So I'm going to jump right in there. So we need to name the assessment. So let's just say, I'm going to call this maybe Chapter 1 Pretest. And then you can enter a description of what it's all about. And you can have instructions for how they need to work on it. Now, pretty standard thing in most things you have on XYZ, you can either have it hidden or shown by dates. You can have it show always, or you can have it start showing on a particular date. So it just kind of depends on how you want to set that. Available until, so how long do they have to take the assessment? So here, 26, that's fine. If you want a different date, then you can just go pick it. So let's say I'm going to have this on day 1 of class. And then keep open as review, never, let's see, always after due date. So that it depends on the assessment, but for this one I'm going to say I want them to always be able to go back and look at it. They can't necessarily redo it. We have all kinds of other settings here, and the choices that you make under assessment options pretty much determine whether you could label it as a homework or a test. Whether there's a time limit for it. Test, homework, or quiz may have a time limit. The display method's a pretty big one. Full test at once. So all the questions are displayed on the page and then they get to answer them. Or they get them one question at a time. Full test, submit one at a time. So they only see one question and they have to submit it to see the next question. Skip around's kind of a nice one. They can just jump around from one question to the next. Embed, I'm not really sure what to tell you about that. And video queued, it means it goes along with some of the videos that are available from mathtv.com, which is a part of the same system that we're using. So I'm just going to go over the basic stuff. So I kind of like the skip around, whether it's a test or a quiz, but it depends on how you want your students to be able to navigate through it. So it's kind of like a regular homework assignment or test in paper. They skip around doing things as they want. Default points per problem. Usually I set this for 1 at the start, and then I can go back and change points per problem later. How many times they get to attempt it. So if it's a homework, I might give them more attempts. If I want them to be able to have a mastery, like keep doing it over and over until they get it, then I would set 0 for unlimited attempts. Okay. If this is a quiz, I might give them just 1 attempt. If it's a test, for sure, I'm going to give them 1 attempt. Homework assignment, typically I might go for 3 attempts on that. Reattempts are different versions. Is always a good option too if you're going to give them reattempts, unless you want the exact same problem each time. Penalty, if there's if they miss it, they get less points for it. So you do whatever you want there. So you could put 0 if you want. Then there's no penalty for missing on the first try. Or you have some other options. Missed attempt after 1 try, and so on. All right, feedback. Show score on each question as it's submitted. Does not apply to full test at once display, which was the display method we had a choice from over here, right there. And there's a bunch of other options that you can play around with. And again, your choice of options will be what denotes this as a quiz, test, or homework according to your standards. Show answers. Most common one is to do it after the due date. They appear in the grade book, but you have some other options here as to when the students will get to see the answers to the questions. Math Quill in the advanced form. Math Quill is a pretty math type program, so if somebody types 1/2 for 1/2, it turns it into a fraction. 1/2, which is kind of cute. That's fun to play with. Let's see, hints. If it's a homework assignment, I do want the hints to be available. If this was a test, I would probably not have the hints available. Okay, so let's see. If it's a homework assignment, then show message instructor bot question is one I think is super important. Or we could link this to the posts forum so that students could write to each other and the instructor. Those are another good options there. And then you would pick the forum, whether there's usually default forums for each chapter or unit in the class. So I might connect this to the chapter 1 forum. Allow use of late passes. So if you've assigned students late passes, which means that if something was due on the 30th of October and the student just can't get it done on that day, they could apply a late pass you gave them to that homework to get an extra day to work on it. And so you can choose whether they're allowed to use a late pass on this assignment or not. So if this is a homework or a quiz, I might let them apply a late pass, but I might only let them have one. Unlimited, they can use all their late passes on this assignment, or maybe none if it's a test. You got to take it when everyone else is. Make it hard to print. If it's a homework or assignment or just a casual quiz, I might say no on make it hard to print so that the student can print it out and mess around with it and then come back with it. If it's a test, then I might want to make it hard to print so that I don't have to worry about people trying to give it to another student in a cheating kind of way. So let's say this is going to be a homework assignment, and so I'm going to not make it hard to print. Shuffle the order if you're worried about test and cheating. Students having the same questions in the same order, we could say, hey, shuffle it. I'm not going to do that. Default grade category, so let's see. I have homework grade categories here, so I'm going to put it in the online homework category. Count in gradebook or not. So you can just give work that doesn't count in the gradebook. You can count it as extra credit. Let's see, don't count in grade total and hide from students. So you get a few different options. I'm going to put count in the gradebook. Calendar icon, so what appears in the calendar? So I'm going to put a PT1 because I was calling this a practice test. Is that what I called it before? No, I'm calling it a homework. Oops, pretest. Forgot about that. All right. I'm going to go with that anyway. Let's see, advanced option, minimum score to achieve credit. So when I do practice tests, I often tell students, you got to get a 70% or better on this because they're doing it maybe at home, no proctor, they have the book open, they could have a tutor help. So if they can't get 70% or better, then they have a problem. I have here the ability for them to retry problems. So I'm going to set my 70% or better. Let's see, show based on another assessment. So only show the score of blank points is obtained on assessment. And we're not going to worry about that. Feedback. I'm not going to worry about. All items have the same random seed. If we did that, then although questions have randomization to that, the whole class would get the same set of randomized questions. So for example, if this was a test and I wanted to make sure everybody had not just similar problems, but the exact same problems, I would select that there. And same version of questions. Let's see, penalty for questions done in exception or late pass. So if you did allow the late pass, this could say that they get a penalty for using it. I haven't played around with group assessments, so I don't know what to tell you about that yet, but sometime I will get into that. And let's see, show question categories. I'm not going to get into categories today. So let's create this assessment. All right, so the next thing I need to do is actually populate this with questions. And so that's what we use. This is the potential question section over here. So first we want to select a library of questions. So I'm doing Math 70. Math 70, we are using Algebra, a combined course. So you just look for your textbook in this list. Cool thing is if you've seen other of their textbooks that you like, you can grab questions from those other books too. So Algebra, a combined course. I'm messing with chapter 1. And then you can select as many sections as you want. Now what I find is If I select all of them, then I have too many questions to look at once, and that's overwhelming to me. So usually I explore the questions one section at a time, but that's up to you. So check off whatever section, and you can do multiple chapters at once, multiple sections. It's totally up to you. Again, I usually just do one section at a time in terms of finding questions. And choose Use Library. So we told the system that we want to use the library from the textbook Algebra Combined course, section 1.1, and then we hit search over here, right, orange button, to actually look up any problems related to 1.1 in this book in the test bank. And so then it tells us, okay, so this is book number 304, and we are in chapter 1, section 1, and there's an extra dot here I'm not familiar with. Oh, yeah. So I think this is the relevant part here. That says chapter 1, section 1, problems 1 through 4 are like this problem. I'll hit preview to bring it up. And similarly, this would be chapter 1, section 1, problems 5 through 6 look like this one. Now, once I look at the first one, it says there are 39 possible problems to look at here. And so if I look down the list in this other window, I can see there's a whole bunch of them. And according to this screen, it says there's 39 of them. So what I do next is I just look at it and say, do I want this problem to be on this assessment? If I don't, I just click Next. If I do, then I select Mark Question for Use, and it checks it off here and in the problem set here. And so I just keep searching through, looking for problems that I want to be on this assessment. Now, as much as I like the online testing systems, Pearson's and this one, I don't always like scrolling through and looking at problems on the computer screen. So what I often do is I look in the book and I circle a bunch of problems I want. And then based on the problems I picked in the book, when I pick a section to search on, I then go and say, oh yeah, I like problem number 9, I like problem number 24, I like problem number 31, 32, 35 through 38, and so on. And then I can go grab them that way too, and I don't have to deal with the preview here necessarily. But it's always a good idea to double check that the problem is what you think it's going to be. And then the type of problem also. So some problems you're asked to draw something, like on a number line. Here we're just asked to enter a number. Could be a multi-part problem. Could be a multiple choice problem. A string means we're going to have to type something in, possibly an equation or words. So sometimes I don't like maybe the way the multi-part or the multiple choice turn out. So I usually double check the problems before I put them in. Once you've selected the problems you want, you can add them or add using defaults. Now I usually start with add using defaults. That just gives each problem the same settings, which makes it pretty easy to work with. So I did section 1, so then I go back to select libraries. My book should be open. I turn off section 1 and I move to section 2 if this is a multi-section assessment. So after we select the libraries, remember we have to hit search next. And then this lists all the problems in the test bank related to the book I picked, chapter, section, and then it shows the problem numbers. And then I can go and preview and add. And so just like before, we scroll through and decide which ones we like and which ones we don't. If you see that there's a whole range of problems you really just don't like, you can just X out of that and pick up later on in the list. And then you can exit out. You can go in and out of that anytime you want. Once you've selected problems, either through that preview selection or just manually checking them off, then I usually do add using defaults. You can also go to preview selected to see what you've selected, or just straight add, which is a little bit different than add using defaults. So one more time, we find our book from use libraries, chapter and section that we want. Some books have a chapter test you can pull full questions from, and some don't. Depends on the book that you're working with. Select the library. It should list which section you just checked. Often I'll forget to uncheck the previous one and it would say something like multiple selections there. So let's just see what that looks like. So here it says section 1.2 and 1.3. Again, if I do that, that's going to be a lot of problems. But the cool thing is it at least does segment it and say, oh, you're looking at 1.3 problems now. Okay. All right. As far as the view here, that just tells you metadata about the problem. Add is adding that individual problem to the set of problems we have above. And template is the information that makes the problem kind of what it is. So I don't recommend messing with that template unless you've read about how to author problems in this system. Okay, so once you have that all in there, some other things we can do are we can go to change settings. And there's no, oh, I forgot to select my questions. Oops. Select all, change settings. And so here I could go through and decide that I want them to be worth different amount of points. And so I could say this one's going to be worth 1, and this one is going to be worth 2, and that one's 1, and that one's 10. And then I can save those changes. As far as hint, I already set how to use hints and video buttons in the settings for the whole assessment, or I could change that default here to something else. And attempts, if I want to change the default for the whole test, I could say, well, for this problem, I want to have 5 attempts, or for this problem, I want to have 0 unlimited attempts, or just 1 attempt. So you can change that on a question-by-question basis, or just go with the settings we made earlier when we first started. So I can change the point values for them. I can remove the problem again. Group is kind of cool. So let me demonstrate group. So I'm going to select the problems from section 2, say. I'm going to group them together. Okay, so that makes them related. Now I have the option of how to use those grouped questions. And so what I can do is say I could use all 5 of them in there. But a lot of times what I'll do is if they're all kind of sort of similar and I don't need to test all of them, I can say just use 3 of these 5, and it'll randomly select 3, in this case without replacement, so that I won't get the same problem twice for a particular student's assessment. And I really like that grouping option for certain kinds of assessments, so that's something you could mess around with. We could always select this group again and ungroup them. And have them not grouped. There's another thing we can do with questions called categorize, but I'm not going to go over that on this one. Once you've picked all the problems you want to pick and you've grouped or not, you're pretty much done with your assessment. You can go check it out. So here, since I added at the top, it appears as the first assessment. Now, let's see, this was supposed to say Chapter 1 pretest, so I can go to its settings and fix my mistype. All the way down to the bottom. I can change any of those settings again if I wanted. And there's a lot of options in there, so it takes some time to get used to. If I wanted to adjust the questions, I would click Questions here, and then that takes me back to where I was before. And since I was recently in here, it shows me the last set of libraries I looked at. If you look at this after you've logged out and log in, I'm pretty sure it won't show anything down here, and you have to reselect libraries and search them. And what else? Now, typically I put it in here from the top, but that's not where I want it to be. So the way I have this course now, I have the calendar here. Under the calendar is Chapter 1. So maybe I want that pretest to appear right before Chapter 1. So then I want it to be second in line. So I just change its number 1 to number 2. And so now I have the pretest there. Now, inside Chapter 1, there are a whole bunch of section links. Maybe I want the pretest to be inside the Chapter 1 group, but before that. The easiest way to do that is to go to Quick Rearrange here. And then I can grab the Chapter 1 pretest and pick its icon up and put it in Chapter 1. So now if I save that and go back to the instructor view, I can see the Chapter 1 pretest is now part of the Chapter 1 group, okay, which is a nice option. So all Chapter 1 stuff can be put in one spot. So you can separate the groupings, pull things out, or put them back in. One of the easiest ways is the quick rearrange. Maybe later you say, nah, I want that back outside of the Chapter 1 grouping here. Oops, I forgot to save it. Okay, so you have a lot of room to play around. So again, the things we played with, we added an assessment. First thing we did to add assessment was give it a name, summary, possible instructions, and then we have to scroll through all these options. After you do it a few times, you'll get used to it. Alternatively, if you don't want to mess with all of those, this is Math 70. Bob Hillenbrand created this course right here. So what you could do is just go on the settings he already had. If it's a homework section, 1.1, you could go in and take a look at the settings here for what he chose. If it's a test, you could go take a look at the settings he has for his test. So then you can get an idea about how somebody else chose those settings to make it a test versus a homework assignment versus a quiz. If you have any questions, you can always get in touch with me or Bob Hillenbrand for this course, Catherine Palmer if you're doing Math 25, Pete Hernberg if you're doing Math 95, and Gary Parker, me, if you're doing Math 111. Or you can write to XYZ directly. I go over here to support. Let's see, I can write to XYZ and ask them for help. Those guys are great, really good at getting back to you quick. Back to my home page. All right, so that's about it for assessments. You can add an assessment and then drop it anywhere you want to put it. You can always change the questions and settings. At least after students take it, you probably don't want to mess around with that. If you decide you have an assessment you don't like, you just delete it, and away it goes. So now that assessment is not part of my system anymore. If you create an assessment and you put a due date on it, it is going to appear in the calendar. Okay, so that's what these green buttons are here for. They're assessments that somebody built, in this case Bob Hillenbrand, and so they'll be in the calendar for whatever day they were set to be due. All right, that's it for now. I'll have some other videos for you in the near future. If you have any questions, get in touch with me, and I'll do my best to help you out.